start off season 2, Carter.
Yes, and welcome back to the Hydraulic Press, Carnage in Metal. Everyone's favorite late night podcast dedicated to the horror stories of the Hydraulic Press Company. While many YouTube channels whitewash these devices to be fun and games, smashing fruit and minion toys, we're here to cover the horrible accidents that have occurred over the last 100 years of the Hydraulic Press. But actually, it's Carter and Kevin Explain Football, Season 2. I'm Carter.
And I was expecting a musical number.
No. I'm saving the musical number for the actual season. Like, once the season starts, I'll get the musical number.
It's the preseason spectacular.
Yes.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone. We are doing our second season of Carter and Kevin Talk Football. Explain football, talk football. Well, it depends if we have guests on, I suppose.
According to the picture on the screen for the YouTube channel, it's Talk Football.
Right. So, yeah, we are going into our second season where we will be coming to you basically once a week once the season starts and giving you our opinions, going through sort of what happened, what we think was great, what we think sucked, and everything in between. Our opinions sort of in a fun, digestible format for you all to enjoy.
I think it's gonna be like an interesting time this year. I feel like last season was like the butterfly season for us, even though I said, "Ooh, I'm nervous" like 5 seconds ago before we started recording.
Right.
I feel like this is gonna be a big time. We're gonna be a lot more. We know what to look for more now. We got
right. It's fascinating, sort of what you learn in terms of like what you find interesting to talk about. It really does force you to really look at all 32 teams and be like, what is their deal again? Like, You can't hide anyone. I also think it was interesting because last year we had two teams in kind of exciting, interesting places. The Eagles had just come off of their Super Bowl run. The Bills were had come off one of the more stressful seasons in their history, capping with the Damar Hamlin incident. And both of them kind of didn't match expectations. So now we're kind of in a transitional period for our personal teams, and in a lot of ways a transitional point for the league. This is an exciting year. We have 6 rookie quarterbacks looking to start at some point during the season, a record number in the first round. We have arguably one of the more exciting wide receiver drafts in recent memory.
Correct.
We have new coaches out the wazoo. We have the first time in forever, we have a chance for a three-peat Super Bowl champion. And in general, just a weird amount of hope for this offseason for a surprising amount of teams.
I feel like this was a very solid offseason for a lot of teams.
Yes.
And I'm pretty... It's that weird point where, honestly, in my opinion, a lot of teams played a lot of starters during preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused some consequences and issues for some teams.
Yes.
But they're like halfway down the list.
Yes. So for this episode, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We are going to do a preseason vibes check. So basically, the idea I had was we will go through all 32 teams and just kind of give how do we feel about their vibes? Are they feeling good going into the season? Are they feeling bad going into the season? Are they going some third option? Like, based on what happened last season, what they did in the offseason, and kind of just the buildup of training camp going into our first week of games in, I guess, a week and a half? What is it? 7?
A weekend.
Like 9-ish days.
Yeah. What day of the week?
9-ish days.
Wednesdays or something? So.
Yeah, probably. Probably should do it before the Thursday night games.
Yeah, so like a week from tomorrow, I guess. What? No.
Oh, right. I didn't think about... Well, if we post it this Wednesday, it'll be about 8 days.
Yeah.
But you're not here for us to figure out our schedule. You're here for the football. Do you have anything you want to say before we kick it off?
Let's play some football.
Oh. I have a very sore throat from a combination of birthday celebrating and actually being sick. I should not be doing that.
Yeah.
Wait till
later in the season.
I was fighting for my life during that Princess Mononoke episode of the Disney Desk, my other show.
Princess Mononoke is fantastic. Best Studio Ghibli movie, in my opinion. But that's a different show.
Oh, yeah.
This show is
It's
football.
a top 5. Well, it was Wind Rises and Mononoke, and with the benefit of
This is
hindsight, you
football.
should not do 2 2-hour thoughtful movies in one episode. But lessons learned. Let's start off with the AFC West with the Super Bowl winning Kansas City
We're
Chiefs.
going by conference. I was looking at the alphabet version. Give me a second.
Oh, Jesus. Do you want to do alphabet? I'll pivot to alphabet version.
We're sticking with what you said. AFC West.
My apologies. All right. Let's kick it off with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes. They
I feel like
re-signed Juju. Fun fact.
Yes, we literally just got the news that Juju Smith-Schuster is back, so obviously the vibes are through the roof, baby.
Yeah, that's he's one of those guys who's like skipping around teams now, just like kind of ring hunting a little bit. I mean, minus being in the Patriots last season.
Yeah.
But
Well, that was rehabilitation because some of the reports out of their camp about his knee were
scary,
alarming to say the least.
Yes.
Yes, in terms of like, is he able to run on a football field? Yeah, it is crazy. He went from like one of the most well-known players into the NFL into a journeyman veteran alarmingly quick. It really is a testament to how quick your fate can change in this league. But I think by law, I'm almost tempted to zag and say the vibes are kind of bad because they did have kind of a weird drama-based offseason. But can you really say the vibes are bad after you won a Super Bowl and didn't really lose anyone of note?
Yeah, they maintained very well. I guess that's another part of like kind of leaking into the big moments thing of if you won the Super Bowl and you maintained a good portion of your roster,
right?
And you didn't lose any crazy significant names.
Right. You lost a very good cornerback in L'Jarius Sneed.
Yes.
But it's like, all right, well, that's why you draft well and also have Trent McDuffie. So you have the luxury of being like, well, we're not going to have 2 all-pro cornerbacks, but we'll have 1. That's good.
Yeah, so it's like,
yeah,
that's one of those things where they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. They didn't lose like half their roster, and it's just like, ooh, these guys are going downhill fast. It's like they've maintained very well.
Right. You locked up Creed Humphrey, your all-star center, for a long period of time. A sort of stealth decent pick, Marquise Brown, who's he was disappointing in the context of the Baltimore Ravens needing him to be a number 1 wide receiver. But for a receiving core that is in desperate need of speed and playmaking versatility, I think he actually is kind of what they need. Because, he's got exactly 2 options. Catch the ball at goal line and run really fast, or run really fast and then catch the ball 30 yards downfield. And that's kind of what they need. It is interesting, so much discussion about Patrick Mahomes was like, he's learning how to take the little stuff. They're going to be more methodical and lean on their top 5 defense. In this offseason, they were like...
won multiple Super Bowls. I feel like him being, like, needing to be more methodical is not really a huge statement.
Right. It really is like saying, like, well, these first couple paintings from Monet, the flowers were a little splotchy. Maybe he'll figure it out on painting 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love they represented this change where it's like defense is finally catching up to offense. You can't just sling the ball downfield anymore. You have to have a good run game, a good defense. Yeah, you have to grind it out a little bit. And this offseason, they're like, well, that kind of sucked. Let's not do that again. Let's change it up. Mm-hmm. So they get Marquise Brown and also draft Xavier Worthy, who shattered the record for the fastest 40 time at the Combine and showed flashes of potential during the offseason when he wasn't getting bullied because he's like 170 pounds.
Yeah.
I think about, look, I'm around 180. I don't like the idea of a me-sized person on an NFL field. Yeah. I have no delusions about my ability to survive getting hit on a football field. But yeah, honestly, for me, the only things that are down on them are just like, one, the stress of sustained success.
Yes.
And also just like a lot of weird off-season drama. Patrick Mahomes' brother was like being a sex pest. Yeah. Like Brittany Mahomes has quietly been implicated in like political stuff.
Yeah.
They signed Matt Ariza, the sort of disgraced sort of celebrity punter. Harrison Butker shoved his whole foot up his mouth.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a dark day
Rasheed
for
Rice
field goals,
caused a.
baby.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can speak on that as like brand poobah of the kicker cult. I was trying to think of an alliteration there, but Rasheed Rice got in an egregious car accident. It looked like he was going to be suspended, but now it doesn't look like he's going to be suspended. Like, we have no idea. But it's like, okay, but if the talent's still there, like, it's not like this isn't the first time they've had some off-field drama.
Yeah. No, it's far from the first time, and I honestly doubt it would be the last.
Right. I mean, that Travis Kelce, you never know with him.
Yeah. Who caught a freaking behind-the-back pass during preseason?
Right. Again, how can the vibes be bad when you're dicking around like that? Yeah, I mean, honestly, and that's like the biggest question of just like, will their regular season record live up to the standards they want in the playoffs? Because it's like, there was a feeling at the end of last year they took their foot off the gas a little bit because it's like, look, we just have to get to the playoffs. Everything else is, that's all that matters.
Is paid for in our favor.
Right. I imagine there might be a period of the year where they lose like 2 out of 3, and there's a lot of like angst and consternation, and then they get to the playoffs and win 3 straight and go to the Super Bowl again, and everyone's just kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah. All the doubters
Yeah.
would instantly be like, oh, yeah, like, we knew this was going to happen the whole time.
Right, we never lost faith. Never let it be. I can't have you put it on record that we lost faith. Yeah, honestly, like, I don't know if you have any other points you want to make on them, but like, what is their goal for this season? Honestly, I feel like this is the obvious one.
I feel like this is the obvious one. They're probably going to be Super Bowl bound again.
Yeah, the goal is to win another Super Bowl. It feels like, this might be the last go for Travis. It might be the last go for a couple people on this team. I mean, they're shockingly young looking over their roster, but like,
yeah, I think
there will be a paradigm shift after this year. That's for sure.
I think like the first Mahomes season, or like the first couple, like leading up to that first Super Bowl with them, is like that was their like old guard, like going. It's like, oh, we have this hot kid who's gonna help lead the team, and then they did that, and then that's when they had the veteran drop off.
Right.
And now they're like...
Right. There was a talent drain after the Alex Smith era cleared out.
Exactly. And now it's like... It's kind of young, but still... It's still like the first 2 picks of the backyard team, where it's just like, you know what? The 2 big brothers are going to play with everyone else's younger brothers, and they're still going to win, but it's going to mostly be them 2. Like, leading the charge.
Right. The only consternation is, like, you really, like, again, you're, like, everyone's legacy here is already kind of secure. Patrick Mahomes already has 3 Super Bowls. Travis already has 3 Super Bowls. Andy Reid has 3 Super Bowls now and appeared in another one. Like, well, appeared in 2. I forgot about the Tampa one, right? God, they've been to 4 fucking Super Bowls.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, all of that of feeling like, oh, this is the moment. Patrick's I'm older than him now. I'm a month older than him. And, like, he's got plenty of time. They're going to have plenty of time to win more Super Bowls. It would just be cool to win this year for the history of it.
No, it'll be fun. All right, should we stay in the division?
Yeah. What are we looking at next in the West?
Based off of how they did last season, the Las Vegas Football Raiders.
God, they were second in the division after all that. That's really funny.
Tied for second.
Remember when people were like, this is the best division in football, and now it's just like...
This is a division in football.
This exists.
Raiders, I feel like, have done the silliest move. Like, I think things are going well on a vibe capacity for them, especially after last season, and then everyone's like campaigning. It's like this... I forget the coach's name off the top of my head, but it's like, this guy's staying as our coach. All the big names are like, I will be gone in a heartbeat if he doesn't keep the coaching spot.
They learned their lesson from the last time, because they had an interim coach after John Gruden's emails came out, and then they got rid of him in favor of Josh McDaniels. And it seems like they've learned their lesson of, we should probably just let the
players.
Interim coach. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
that's kind of all you can do. Like, my answer for their vibes check is kind of that good because like they're just a weird team,
Oh,
frankly.
they're
Like,
super. Here's the thing. I feel like they're embracing the weird.
right?
You have
Yeah,
Max Crosby and Gardner Minshew on the same football team.
as your spiritual leaders.
Like, yeah, Minshew was declared the starting quarterback week 1, and his vibes and Max Crosby's vibes, in my opinion, it is like the best part of like redneck. I'm gonna turn around and they're gonna be using a excavator to uh like as a slip and slide moving like engine basically.
Jesus.
You ever see those things?
Yeah.
I feel
Yes.
like the energy those two bring is like, oh, it's those neighbors.
Yeah, it's also just like you look over the people they have on this team, and it really is like it's like a tree. You cut it open and you see all the rings where you're like, oh yeah, that's when John Gruden was the coach and they traded all these picks for these guys. Oh, yep, there's when they traded everything for Divine. Like it's like 4 different eras of football
Yes.
that all kind of ended shockingly quick, leading up to this like weird sort of Frankenstein team of like admittedly
It's
a lot of talent. Like you look over and you're like, that's not a bad skill position. That offensive
no.
line is okay. The defense is fine.
It's like they are weak because they don't like some teams have like a very strong section.
Mm,
Other teams like are weak because they just don't have anything. This has like middle of the tier for every single like
right.
spot.
It is impulse decisions made by 4 or 5 different leaders over like 7 years,
Yeah.
and now it's like, well, this is kind of the we have like 1 or 2 years before we really have to start dumping all these people. Like we didn't want to get rid of Max Crosby, so we're going to commit to that. We're not going to trade Devontae Adams because we're not going to get as much back as we paid for him.
Yeah.
I think like honestly, it really is the quarterback position that's all of this. Because again, if you had even top 15 quarterback play, I'd be like, yeah, they make the playoffs easy.
Yeah.
Like, it's not too hard. But you know what it is?
It's
By all
Minshew.
accounts, they really well, yes, it's Minshew, which is the embodiment of you need 10 wins to make, or you need 9 wins to make the playoffs. He'll get you 9 wins. You need 10 wins to get to the playoffs. How does 9 wins sound?
Yeah.
But yeah, they by all accounts really wanted Michael Penix. But then the Falcons did the most Falcons thing they could have possibly done.
Which was absurd.
And the Raiders are sitting right, and we'll get to that. But the Raiders just sit there and go like, I guess we could get. I know we drafted a tight end in the first round last year, but
What
how
if we
about
do it
another
again?
one? Although that being said, you do watch them and you're like, okay, at least they understand that Brock Bowers is basically a slot receiver who happens to play tight end. Like I'm actually excited to see what they do with Michael Mayer and Brock on the field at the same time. Like again, there's talent. They can do interesting things. The question is just like, how far can you get with that?
Exactly.
What do you think? What is your idea of like what is a victory state for them? What is their goal?
A victory state is a winning record.
Yes,
I feel like that is a
I
very
think
solid claim. Like maybe 9-8, maybe 10-7. Will they be playoff bound? I don't want to guarantee that. Like
right.
they're at least getting. They're not getting the division. They're getting either wild card or nothing.
Right, they're getting the 7th seed or nothing.
But
if they are in the hunt going into week 17 on like the football graphics, I will consider that a victory.
Yes, they are like. I think we talked about it with the Buccaneers last year, where I referred to them as Baker Mayfield was leading the frat boy team.
Yes.
These are the guys that are like the union guys. They went into a trade instead of college. So they're the same age as the frat boy team, but they're like picking fights with them at a bar. I feel like that is the way to describe the Raiders.
That is very funny, and that is a good way to put it. I will be excited to see what they do this year.
Yeah, they're gonna.
Because you could tell me that they're a sneaky playoff team, or you can tell me they're gonna start 1-7 and they're gonna have to trade Devontae Adams, and I'm like, those outcomes are equal.
Yeah. There is
Um,
no telling what these guys are actually gonna do, and they have the. I'm honestly gonna say the wrong amount of stars. They're not a bunch of nobodies, kind of like the Patriots, where it's just like, oh yeah, there's not a lot of huge names, so they're not going far. But it's like they have some big names and some of the best players at their positions. Like, I'm not a big Max
yes,
Crosby guy, but I won't deny he's good.
yes, right. Like they have just enough stars that they're never going to be able to completely bottom out and get like a top pick. Like the reason why they couldn't get Michael Penix is because they had just enough talent to not be in range to get Michael
Yeah.
Penix, or any the slightly better quarterbacks. Um,
Mm-hmm.
shall we move on?
Yes.
Who was third in this division?
Technically tied, based off of record alone and not like division stuff. The Denver Broncos.
The vibes here are
Scared.
nowhere to go but up.
I don't want to make that confirmation. They are starting.
Yeah,
Bo
right.
Nix.
That feels a bit ambitious.
Yeah, Bo Nix over Zach Wilson, which is, speaking of the frat boys. There he is.
Zach Wilson, who, and there's a couple quarterbacks we could put in this camp these days, but you watch him in the preseason, and you're like, how have you literally made no progress?
Yeah.
Like by accident, don't you just learn things through muscle memory?
Yeah, pretty much. And honestly, they just don't have. They don't have much.
Right. This was a full blown post Russell Wilson, and they're still paying Russell Wilson, which is why he could take pennies to go to the Steelers. They are in full blown, let's just blow 90% of this up and let Sean Payton build it from scratch. The best thing I've ever heard someone say about this current state of the Broncos is it's all one big grift.
Mm-hmm.
So the original owners were giving up the team to the Walter Penner family ownership group, which short version, they're basically this like conglomerate of rich freaks who own Walmart. So basically, the Broncos are run by Walmart money, essentially. And at the 11th hour, the old owners are like, well, if we get a star quarterback, we could probably jack up the price a little bit. So they get into the sweepstakes for either Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. They bring in Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers' beloved OC, who does nothing, as head coach on the grounds of like, oh, this will give us a better chance to get Aaron Rodgers. This guy who really isn't qualified gets a head coaching job just because he's friends with Aaron Rodgers. That doesn't work. They get Russell Wilson, who naturally takes as much money as possible. It's a freaking disaster because it turns out neither of them are a good coach or quarterback anymore. And then Sean Payton goes, well, you can give me more money than any coach has ever gotten, or I'll go to the Chargers and make Justin Herbert a MVP candidate. So they overpay him. And basically, it's just all of these people who just want a big old cut of the Walmart pie.
Yep.
The gross prefab pie. But yeah, I like Sean. In spite of it all, I like Sean Payton. I want to believe that there was good logic here. But the Bo Nix pick feels so like, it feels impulsive. Just like, I can't stand being around Russell Wilson anymore. His vibes give me the ick. And I also refuse to start, like, I refuse to go get a Gardner Minshew. Give me someone I can mold.
Yeah.
Bo Nix, for the record, how old is he? He's very old. He's already 24. Which I know in reality isn't that old, but for an NFL rookie, that is
that's pretty old.
That's kind of ancient. He played college too long, and it's so funny because he kind of already is. You want a good reference? Kyle Pitts has been in the league for 3 years. He's 23. Kyle Pitts, who had like a normal college career where it's like you do 3 to 4 years. But yeah, like Bo Nix is already old. Drew Brees of like, I don't have the strongest arm. I'm not the fastest, but like, just do short routes. I'll flip it to the running back. I'll do slant routes. I'll just like dink and dunk us down the field and score. But the problem is that was Drew Brees at like 40 when his arm was giving out. This kid is nominally a rookie and he's already there.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, looking over their roster, I'm just like, they didn't really add anything. They just kind of removed stuff. Yeah. It was, again, just a money and resource drain to try and like rebuild the coffers.
Yeah, this is like the post Kansas City win like era of like we're just gonna lose a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
and not replace them correctly.
Right. I'm literally looking over this and I'm like, who do I consider a blue chip talent here? Like, Cortland Sutton is the embodiment of that. I'm tired of people saying he'd be good with a good quarterback. It's just not. Stop trying to make fetch happen. It literally might just be Patrick Surtain.
Yeah,
who is the, like, everyone wants him to get traded, and they're like, no, because we're not going to get another Patrick Surtain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as much as we love our star cornerbacks, if your best player in your team is a cornerback, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah.
What is a good win? Like, what is a victory for them?
No season-ending injury for Bo Nix.
Fair. For me, it really is just like, have a sense of a plan. Like, you've basically bet the farm on Sean Payton being a genius. Like, something in his process of building this team, just see enough flashes where it's like, okay, there's a direction here. Is it good? Is it great? Yeah. But is it a direction?
We can go somewhere. We have some pieces to said puzzle. And
not a lot, but a few.
Next is the Los Angeles Chargers.
This is an interesting one.
Worse than their division last year, which is kind of one of those like real surprising ones. Because they theoretically were good on paper. I'm not sure how to feel about them now.
I would say the vibes are, I guess they're decent. They're better than they were, because that was a sad, sad team that season. Like, coming into last season, they blew like a 21-point lead in the playoffs to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, basically, it was one of those, if you think you might have to fire the coach halfway through the season, you probably should just fire them, sort of things. And sure enough, he got fired. Justin Herbert was hurt. And, while other sports have, like, relegation or, like, cutting seasons off short, no, they just had to play, like, 7 or 8 meaningless games that had no value to anyone or anything.
Yeah, no.
And that's just kind of how the sport works sometimes.
They should have definitely been relegated, honestly. But that's just me.
But yeah, they bring in Harbaugh, where it's like, they bring in Harbaugh, who just came off basically fulfilling his destiny, more or less, of being the Michigan head coach and winning a championship. Basically, the thing he's been trying to do for the better half of 5-ish years since getting fired from the 49ers. If nothing else, him coming in is a vibes improvement, just because he's likable and, like, he's got a weird sort of rah-rah energy that I think this team desperately needs. I mean, they sort of hemorrhaged talent for the most part. They lost Mike Williams and Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
It really is like, despite not having any success, a big era of Chargers football ended. Eckler's gone too. Like, they basically swapped out all of their skill position players and, like, are basically, it really is just going to be the Justin Herbert show and running the ball this year. They got Joe Alt, who I just fell in love with. Like, every now and then you just see, like, a 300-pound, like, goon of an offensive lineman, and you're like, that guy's going to be a 5-time All-Pro and a Hall of Famer. And I'm like, that's it. Like, for the first time in Justin Herbert's career, he might not be running for his life all the time, and I think that's a victory.
Yeah, Alt is a very solid acquisition, especially as a lineman. I mean, only as a lineman, because he doesn't play multiple spots, but, like, compared to other linemen, he's one that's just like you can smile and nod a little bit, like, yeah, we did this.
Yeah. And, like, I know people wanted them to go with, like, Malik Neighbors. They wanted to go with, like, the sexier offensive pick, but it's like,
no, they gotta be unsexy.
Right. I think that's the problem. Like, Herbert came onto the scene so quickly and was so flashy, and you had all of these, like, well-known names, despite, like, their aging and injury problems with, like, Allen, Mike Williams, and Eckler. Like, it was a sexy team on paper, but it never had a foundation. Half the time, Herbert was getting you really underrate how many freaking injuries that guy's had, between, like, having exploded ribs, a bad foot. Right now, he's dealing with, like, some problem with his foot. Like, he's gotten the stuffing kicked out of him to start his career. Like, you kind of just have to start from scratch and, like, start from build a foundation before you go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are we thinking for them?
I'm thinking I'm thinking rebranding year, not rebranding, but like we're gonna take a season to not be like we're not trying too hard this season. We're gonna focus on like the basics and just try and show up with a better look and a relatively decent, like relatively early draft pick where it's not so early that you think that the team is screwed, but it's like early enough that you can be like, all right, like we can get one of the top guys, like a top 10 draft pick.
Right.
And
Right.
that
Like I
and
don't
then
think them being in the top 10 would be a disaster this
and
year.
I think that's when they're going to get the sexy pick. I think this last season was smart to pick the unsexy one by getting just security for Herbert. This time I wouldn't be like I think they're gonna go for the sexy one, and I wouldn't be surprised if they start doing a little too well in some games
Hmm.
where they just like you clearly see them dial it back to try
Right. I
and
could totally see them. I could see them being at the Cardinals level where they were at
yes
the end of last year, where they win one or two games you really feel like they shouldn't have, just because like they're tough and they like grind it out. They grind it out in the later games and just like
yes.
pound the stuffing out of the rock.
All right,
Yeah, but again, it's like it's selling people on this franchise being serious because for so long it's like the Chargers have been synonymous with like cartoonish disaster and bad luck.
mm-hmm.
Like build a foundation of like we are building a franchise here, not just desperately chasing, well, it's LA, obviously we should win.
Yeah.
All right. What division are we moving to next?
Let's go El Norte.
All
AFC
right.
North.
Probably the best division and like we actually mean it.
Yeah, this is a very well-rounded division.
You could tell me any four of these teams, except maybe the Steelers, could come in first, or that all three of them could make the playoffs, and I would believe that.
That almost happened.
It's actually insane, even after the Joe Burrow injury. Like,
Yes.
we really underrate how well they did in spite of that.
Oh, absolutely. We don't talk about that enough. All right. So first up, division leader conference, like winner of the conference, the Baltimore Ravens, who
Hmm.
I'm I'm sensing this is their big push year. I think
Right.
I think last year was the year they proved we have a lot of right pieces. Let's get a little bit of extra enhancement talent and let's just run.
Yes. I would say, yeah, I would describe the vibes as determined. Because I do think there was a little bit of frustration going right into the offseason because they really did think that was the year. That was it. Where it's like, the Chiefs are a little down this year. We're the number one seed. We statistically have one of the best teams by like advanced analytics the world has ever seen. And then they just came up short. Even though I think you go back and watch that game and you're like, man, they really did outplay Kansas City for most of that game.
Yeah.
If they could have just cut 2 turnovers out, they probably would have won.
It's like
And
it's like when I win Scrabble because I use a 4-letter word on a triple word score and it has like
right.
a K in it. Like it's like that where it's just like this shouldn't have happened. But we just kind of like last second got outplayed a little bit.
Right. And they did have a little bit of a talent drain. They lost I'm trying to who did they lose on their defensive line? They lost someone they lost
Patrick
a few on their
Queen was the
defensive
big
line.
I don't think he
Yes.
was D line, but I think he was a back. But
Oh, yes, he's a defensive back. They lost Patrick Queen.
yeah, Patrick
They
Queen was
lost
the big one.
I believe they have 3 new starters on the offensive line, which like for any other team I'd be slightly more nervous, but again, the Ravens are one of those like institutional franchises where I kind of just
Yeah.
trust a level of competency that they wouldn't have let this happen if they didn't think they could survive it.
Yeah, and like
But
here's the thing, too. Like they have Lamar Jackson, who is he can take stuff.
Mhm.
They have Mark Andrews, who is like a one of the top tight ends in my opinion, and has been for the
Mhm.
last couple like years. And the recently acquired Derrick Henry.
right, like again, we can talk about like analytics and it's hard to like sustain success over a long period of time, but it's like yeah, but Derrick Henry is the sexiest signing of the offseason because it's
Yes.
like imagine a backfield with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in shotgun in the all blacks with the purple trim, and Derrick Henry has his visor on, and the defense has to frantically figure out which one of them is about to grab the ball and start running at full speed at you. Good luck. I'm like, it's kind of hard to top that vibes-wise.
The offensive line just needs to make a small hole for one of these huge men to run through, and then that momentum is going to take them 7 to like 10 yards further than they should have gone.
Right. Like, a lot of people, like, Derrick Henry kind of got ignored last year because the Titans were really, really bad. Yeah, he was on the Titans, who were really, really bad, and their offensive line was probably the worst in the league.
Trash.
But yes, actual trash. But despite like the workload he's had over the years, despite being 30, despite taking all of this punishment throughout his career, one, he's been painfully consistent. He really only lost 1 year due to injury. Mm-hmm. He was still second in the league in rushing yards. He scored 12 TDs. Like, he might actually just be built different. And again, even just getting to a like mid-tier offensive line level, even getting to like the exact 16th best offensive line in the league, I think we just underrate how huge that would be for his career and like longevity and production.
Yeah, and it's not like when he was on the Titans, it was Derrick Henry's Titans.
Right. Again, he was the offense. Now he doesn't need to be the offense because it's Lamar Jackson's offense.
It's Lamar Jackson and friends. And
yes,
he has the ability to he's good enough that he can make short throws, long throws. He could do a lot.
Right. And like how good he looked last year in his first year in a real NFL offense. Again, I'm sorry, but those early offenses just were not serious. Like, again, they went from the least amount of 3 wide receiver sets to like a normal like top 10 amount.
Yeah. Just
that was huge. And it's like just another year in that system with a theoretical better running game and about the same wide receivers. Someday, Rashad Bateman, you'll be good. I know you will. And another year with Zay Flowers. Most of my stock is like the offense will just be better because of like consistency.
Yes.
And yeah, they lost a little bit on the defense, and I think losing Mike McDaniels as one of the best defensive coordinators in the league could come back to bite them in the butt. But at the same time, again, it's not like the talent has completely drained. You still have arguably 2 top 10 defenders. I'm sorry, I'm such a Kyle Hamilton slut. I pardon my language, but like as far as like straight up, if you just asked me to rank like the best defensive players in the league, arguably the best NFL, like I'd be hard pressed not to have him in the top 10 best players in the league. I think he's that good. He is a freaking unicorn. He's 6'4", like he's the size of a very big linebacker, but also has the speed and range of a defensive back. He can basically cover the entire field by himself. The best comparison I've ever seen made to him is that he's basically Ken Griffey Jr. from baseball.
Nice.
Of like you could have him in the outfield by himself, and he would be able to get every single pitch. He is that fast. He is that big. He is that much of a freak explosive athlete. Mm-hmm. As long as they have him, like honestly, if anything, I'm excited to see a new like defensive coordinator come up the ranks and get to play with this amazing toy. Like I feel fine about the defense. And then Justin Tucker's still healthy.
Yeah.
Which is the important thing.
And an opera singer. But that's beside the point.
Yes.
No. Because Justin Tucker is, in my opinion, a top 2 kicker of the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And with this squad, you just need to get into rough field goal range. You don't even have to be close, like, in order to get at least 3 points. So
exactly.
I think this is going to be like a Super Bowl push year, like a bigger one, and they're not going. I don't think that it's going to be a game of, oh, their defense was dominant and stopped a lot of things. I think it's going to be like, oh, the offense scored like 49 points to the opponent's like 28 or like 35. I think they're going to have more higher scoring games based off of their defensive happenings. Mm-hmm. But their offense is still going to be a little too dominant for your average teams.
Yes. Yeah, I think the win state for them is get to the Super Bowl. Like, It feels like there's a 2 or 3 year window here. You've got to just, like, the next time you get up to bat, you can't miss.
I will say, though, not the easiest season.
Yes, they do have a pretty I mean, again, that's why all of this is so relative. But their schedule is harder this year. They have the number 1 schedule as opposed to like the number 2.
Yeah, they have the opening game against the Chiefs actually.
I'm actually kind of shocked they blew that game on the opening weekend. I really thought they were. I don't know. I feel like they tried to do something a little lighter for most opening nights, just because
it was
want to spread out the wealth.
If it wasn't the Thursday night opening game, I would have said it's kind of blowing it a little bit. But this is a conference matchup as the first game of the 2024 season. Literally, like a replay of last year's conference game.
Right.
I feel like that's a excellent way to start the season.
We're in for fun, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, are we moving on to who was? Sorry, I have the preseason standings.
The answer is Browns is next for last season.
Really?
Yeah.
I forgot. Oh, right, because they had the push at the end of the year with Joe Flacco. The vibes here just stink, and they will stink as long as one guy is on that team.
Yep. Agreed.
And it is a shame, because literally every single other part of this team I absolutely love, and I love that the Cleveland Browns have them.
Yeah.
There's just one problem, Chief. Their quarterback's a fucking scumbag.
And also, probably the worst trade in NFL history.
I think it's just undisputed, because again, you look at this team and you're like, God damn it, this team could compete for Super Bowls if it wasn't for him. Because it's not just if it would be one thing if he was good and they were winning, where it's like, well, this sucks, but only sucks on a moral standpoint.
Yeah.
This sucks in that they sold their soul. It literally, they got nothing from the devil. This isn't Princess and the Frog. You don't get cool powers. No, you don't get to do crazy voodoo magic. You get nothing. Yeah. Nothing. Injuries and angst.
Yeah, you got Nick Chubb, who had a terrible season-ending injury last year, which...
The fact that he's even talking about coming back is a miracle.
Yeah, exactly. Amari Cooper, Myles Garrett, these are solid players.
Right.
But
you have arguably the best defense. Yes. And it's again, some teams just feel cursed, and it's like the Cleveland Browns, after all that angst, after all that kind of deliberate losing for years upon years, after wasting talent here and there throughout the 2000s, finally put together a great team, come up with a great defensive system that just absolutely dominates the regular season. Arguably, you have blue chip talent on all 3 levels of the defense. Myles Garrett, Owusu-Koramoah, who I love, another one I'm just go to bat for. Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward when he's healthy. And then a perfectly solid collection of offensive players.
Yeah.
And then it just all falls apart and it's like, yeah, but you forgot the one really important thing, didn't you?
The biggest paid player on every team.
The only man who will ever get another fully guaranteed contract. I really do think the commissioner should be calling people up. Just be like, hey, the minute Patrick Mahomes' contract is up, that's all. We can't have this be the only one. Yeah. If it's one of 2, we can kind of stomach that. It can't be the only one. Between Josh and Patrick, whoever contract ends first, the commissioner has to be like, we'll pay for it. Y'all complete under the table, just for the vibes of it. I mean, again, and here's the thing. This year, they do not have the fallback of Joe Flacco being, the exact right amount of disaster artist for this team. Because, Joe Flacco was a bit of a mess last year. He threw a lot of interceptions, but it was made up for the fact that he could actually make plays.
Yes, that old wizard really did it.
Yeah. That and, the defense is good, so we'll be fine. As long as the interceptions are going with touchdowns, as opposed to Deshaun Watson, where the interceptions are going with 3 and outs.
Mm-hmm.
What is a win?
I think they have the ability to be playoff bound, but it's they need to not lose. I think it's going to be more of a post next season thing for them to determine a win. Is they don't lose big names. Well, they can lose one big name, but they don't lose the rest of the big names. I think that's their best. A genuine win state for them would be something else comes out about Deshaun Watson and the commissioner basically pulls an emergency switch that voids his contract, which is basically where I'm at with Von Miller and the Bills. Yep.
Where I'm like, technically, the commissioner has some level of power to do this. So like, if it happened to the Browns, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
Because their backup is Jameis Winston, who also has his own history of legal problems, but is slightly quieter about it than Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
Next up, I believe, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. God,
Correct.
this division really was good.
It was a fantastic division, yes. All three of including the Steelers, the last 3 teams all had winning double-digit numbers.
Unbelievable. I think,
Vibes are
and
weird.
I guess I would say it is good we waited until the preseason was mostly over to do this, because if we did it at the start, I would say vibes are pretty good. They finally got a new offensive coordinator, which has been a problem for them for a while. They moved off a couple of guys, but they finally started building an offensive line, and they brought in some new offensive talent. And you know what? Maybe Russ just needs a new change of scenery. And if that doesn't work, maybe Justin Fields just needed a change of scenery.
Yeah.
And then the preseason happened, and
now
it was somehow worse than the cynics could have predicted. Look, I've been Justin Fields has been one of my guys. I've defended him a lot. But watching him this preseason has actually been kind of depressing, because he's another guy where you're just like, how are you not fixing this? Did you just get thrown out there too soon, and the scar tissue won't let you heal and evolve? You just watch him, and it's just insane that it's every time he drops back, he's just la-di-dying. He's so slow when he drops back. It's how does he even get a ball off half the time? And Russ, I guess I'm less surprised about Russ, because it's the same problems he had last year of he still wants to be Russell Wilson, but his body isn't Russell Wilson anymore. He can't do that thing where he just runs around for 30 seconds and then flings a perfect moon ball across the field to someone. He doesn't have that anymore. So now we just have this weird team that, again, much like some of the other teams we talked about, has simply too much talent to not make the playoffs, but the pieces don't all quite fit right together. They're different eras, they're different periods, they're different tastes. Their new offensive coordinator is Arthur Smith. Yeah, it's Smith, right? I always forget. The guy from the Falcons who everyone hated.
Art Smith.
The rich loser.
Still
Art Smith.
Regardless of what you call him, he's still Art Smith.
Yeah, he, that, who, I feel like it could be better as an offensive coordinator, but not with these pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't... And then the defense, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It's always going to be good.
Yes.
Everyone brags about Mike Tomlin, never having a losing record. At what point does that become a curse? At what point is it just it is funny. This league weirdly does not incentivize consistent winning enough, because at some point you just get into a rut where it's well, we can't draft any blue chip talent. We can get some good guys, but we're never going to get a blue chip wide receiver or a blue chip quarterback or a blue chip defense, the real difference making positions. We can only add offensive line talent or running backs or fringe opportunities. At what point do you kind of deep down, and I guess this is jumping ahead, but I'd argue that for me, their win state is finally having a losing record so they can just start over. I think it might kind of just be time.
Yeah.
I know that's not an actual victory, but it's a victory for the long term.
I think it's something. It's with their offense, I have no idea what's going to happen now. But I think their victory level is getting not last in the division.
Right.
I think that's a solid. This is a win.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, well, did he ever end up making a new slogan? Is it, I fire it up?
I'm a big fan of Steelers Country, Let's Weld.
Right.
I feel
like he would want to avoid that specific language because, bad memories.
Yeah, but we'll see.
It is, God.
I hope he has
Sean Payton was such a bitch to him.
I really hope they have one, because Broncos Country Let's Ride was fantastic.
Look, say what you want. It's part of NFL history now. You can't take that away from him. And he did win a Super Bowl, and he was a pretty good quarterback for years. But
minor things.
Yeah. So finally, in this division, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Um, I think I like what's gonna happen. I wait. Let me rephrase that. I like what could happen.
Hmm. Right. I think that's kind of where I'm at too.
Like, they definitely had a big loss with their running back who went to the Texans, who I was talking about earlier today, whose name is escaping my mind. What is his name?
I'm gonna let you figure this out.
Oh God, I'm gonna just look it up, but it's just like I'm having a stroke apparently. Um,
No, you're just forgetful.
Joe Mixon. There we go.
Right.
I think that's the biggest hit to them, to the Bengals.
Which is funny because they didn't seem to like him very much. They've been trying to trade him for a while.
Yeah, but I have I have a lot of faith in what could happen. They're still a very solid team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Even their backup, Jake Browning, proved himself to have a solid abilities.
Right. I mean, if anything, last season affirmed. I'm like, oh yeah, their coaches are pretty good. I feel like for a while their coaches were getting heat of like, oh, you're not doing anything. It's just the sheer amount of offensive talent you have. And I'm like, the fact that you almost made the playoffs when this disaster scenario happened is actually really impressive.
Yeah, I think their big victory is if Joe Burrow stays healthy.
Right, because that's kind of the thing. Like, I would be way higher on them,
If
but Joe Burrow is currently not throwing 3 days in a row.
Yeah, I think the second he's healthy, because I'm hoping they realize their mistake from last year, where they kind of just threw Burrow in way too soon,
Mm,
and they definitely got worse as the season went on because they just kind of they're like, you'll be fine, and it's just like, ooh, will you be fine? You'll be fine. Like and then he's just out for the season, and they still held their own with the backup, but
right.
it's I think just him staying healthy would be a great acquisition for the team.
Right. That feels like an additive thing because it's like at the end of the day, the core is still here. At the end of the day, the core of this era of Bengals football was Burrow, Chase, Higgins. As long as you have those three, you're going to have a chance. And when you combine that with Big Lou kind of getting it, like last year was kind of rough for the Bengals defense, but I feel like they learned some lessons about like, no, we can't just patch it together. So they brought in a little more talent and hopefully health will be better. But yeah, I guess that's why I'm like, my win state is like, it kind of is a do or die season for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make at least one more serious push to the Super Bowl before you have to start asking tough questions.
Yes.
I mean, if I were them, I would just stop screwing around and just sign T. Higgins. Like, I think, again, get those three, figure everything else out on your own.
Yeah.
Or
This
elsewhere.
This is their ability to lose like a lot of big names.
Right.
Like
I would not screw around with him.
If this season, like, who was it? The Broncos we were talking about. It's just like, or like the Chargers, where it's just like, yeah, they can kind of just futz around basically in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
The Bengals can't. If the Bengals don't make a very strong push, they're gonna lose at least 1 to 3 big names.
Right.
And
yeah, that's a good way of describing it. There's an urgency there that isn't with some of the other Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah. Because it's like the Ravens are, with their contract situation, they're locked in for a while.
Mm.
Chiefs, they have arguably the best quarterback in the league, the best tight end in the league. Arguably are pretty locked in, and they can just use enhancement talent like season to season. The Bengals don't really have that ability. Like, Joe Burrow's good, but they don't. He's not so good that it's like, oh, he just needs somebody to be vaguely open for him to just hit with a dime and be fine. It's like he needs at least for his like starting receivers, at least top 2/3 of the like of the class or the group.
Right. And, like, I mean, that's not even necessarily a dig at him. It's
No.
just, like, remove the margin of error. Like, get the best talent you can get and, like, take advantage of his skills. Take advantage of the things he's really good at with premier talent.
Yeah.
Like, again, we all saw him in that rookie year getting the crap kicked out of him. Don't let that happen again.
Yeah, he's not going to be a Zach Wilson where if he leaves the Bengals, he's going to be put behind a rookie. Like, he's still a fantastic starting quarterback. It's just that he needs a little bit of oomph to help him lead the Bengals.
Right.
All right.
All right. What division is next?
Let's go South. Why not? And we'll end. Hear me out. We'll do South and East, and then we'll take a pee-pee break and do another episode where we do the NFC.
I like that.
All right, perfect. AFC South, with your leaders, our sweet baby boy, coming back for his second season, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans.
The vibes are almost too, like, suspiciously good, where I'm just like, all right, what's the twist going to be here? What kind of weird thing are they going to have to deal with this season?
I think that's the best way to describe it.
Right? I was listening to a podcast today, and they made the argument, CJ Stroud might have the highest approval rating of any player in the NFL right now. Because, like, even now with Patrick Mahomes, the combination of just winning too much and, like, just the weirdness around the Chiefs has kind of dinged his popularity a little bit, where people are kind of tired for him. People like Josh Allen, but he's not, like, very public-facing. He does a couple commercials, but it's not like he's out there, like, doing a lot of, like, media stuff. Like, people like Lamar, despite him having the immune system of a baby. I do love he came out and was like, yeah, I didn't have this problem in college. And I'm like, yeah, that's called long COVID, baby. You should probably talk to some doctors about that. Mm-hmm. But anyway... but, like, Aaron Rodgers has kind of burned all his goodwill. I'm just trying to think of, like, NFL players who, there's no, like, Odell Beckham where he's just, like, huge right now in the skill position field. I really do think CJ Stroud is just the guy. He's, like, the most popular guy. He's charming. He's, like, very, like, you can tell he's, like, a scholar of the game. He does this podcast with another popular player. Like, every time he appears in the media, he's just charming and lovable. Yes. And, like, he's leading, like, an underdog team.
Agreed.
Like, he went from zero. The Texans went from zero to hero.
Yeah, they went from arguably the worst team in the league with Lovie Smith energy, though.
Yes.
To winning their division and having a pretty solid upset in the playoffs.
Right. And even against the Ravens, they at least held their own. Like, clearly they were outclassed because it's like, well, there's still a little work to do, but...
Yeah, but for a team that was absolute trash the season before, that is only a good sign. And then they picked up Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I feel like that's just enhancing CJ Stroud.
Right, but that's the good sign. They didn't rest. My biggest worry for both our two, like, darling teams, the Texans and the Packers. My biggest worry with them was just resting on your laurels and just kind of being like, well, we did it, gang. We beat expectations, and now we can just sit here and let linear progress happen. Like, everyone will get slightly better next year. There won't be any freak injuries. There won't be any weird off seasons. It'll be okay. But they said, no, you know what? We have a quarterback who's already argued probably a top 10 quarterback. Hell, I'd probably put him top 5, really. I'm like, who else would I...
I wouldn't do top 5 yet.
Yeah, maybe...
I'm nervous about the sophomore slump for our baby boy, but...
Right. Yeah, that is really the only hang-up is, like, injuries or, like, hey, now everyone has a to, like, know what you do, and they'll, like, be better prepared for you.
Yeah. Oh, I think...
But, like, yeah, they bring in Diggs as, like, a good compliment to Nico and Tank as, like, Stephon isn't a deep threat anymore, and that's kind of what started to go wrong with his last little run in Buffalo, but he's still... If you need a guy to get open, he is great at the mano-a-mano. I'm going to go up against one of their best corners, and I'm going to get open. And also, he still has that, like, really good sense of what a quarterback needs in terms of getting open.
And I feel like his biggest issue with the Bills last year is Stephon Diggs was kind of just the go-to guy, and he wasn't. He was too much of the go-to guy. Of he was gonna get either hit real hard or just crap passes thrown to him because he's gonna be the one they're gonna be like, let's double cover, let's hit him with the triple coverage, and just
Right.
prevent him from doing any significant progress. But that's based off the Bills' layout. He,
Right. And it really is just, yeah, I just wish people would
yeah,
stop being coy and say exactly what went wrong there. But yeah, it's a lot of like people glommed on him. We were forced to think of other options. And like, yeah, just the vibes got it soured.
yeah. So like him being on a team with Nico Collins, who I wouldn't say is like one of the best receivers, but he's a good receiver, and Tank Dell,
Yeah,
who
finally living up to his
before his
hype.
before his injury looked fantastic.
Right. It is like one of the only hangups I have is like, we did this with Tony Pollard last year. Breaking your leg kind of matters. And
Yeah,
granted, he did it like halfway through the season, so you kind of hope there's more time. He also got shot. I
yeah,
forgot about that.
that did
He got
happen
caught
too.
in like a shootout and got hit. But no one's saying like even if he's not 100%, if he can at least be 90% for this team for this year, that's good. I also think like a couple big advantage for them are one, health. Like Devin
Hmm.
Singletary, their quarterback, just was not healthy at all last year. They went through like 12 different offensive line configurations. Those things will be fixed. And I also think like they understand now what they have with CJ Stroud. Like last year, especially early, they really were trying to do like a more methodical, like, hey, let's make an offense for a rookie quarterback offense,
Yes.
where it was like run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, play action pass, easy passes. And it's like, well, this isn't working. And then they're like, you know what? Let's just let this guy cook. And it
Hmm.
worked. So I do think they'll also just have the advantage of like, while other teams will have the advantage of getting an extra year to study them, so will like the reverse is also true of like a year with this offensive coach with this like staff being like, all right, what can we really do though?
Yeah. What's gonna happen? And I think I think they made the right moves. I think with what they displayed last season made them desirable enough because they showed like, oh, we're a winning team now. They
Mm,
showed enough that it's just like when people are looking for contracts, they're not gonna like they actually have like a little bit more of a legitimate pick of the litter, where it's just like, oh, okay, like because people actually entertain them.
mm,
Um, if if this season goes well as well, I think that like, and I'm talking like just playoff, like easy playoffs, like that's the start, like minimum. You're gonna get the attention of the bigger name receivers and running backs, like bigger than Stephon Diggs and Mixon,
mm.
and like some like defenders too that are just like, okay, so we got some winners. I can help
Right.
turn this team, like the newest team in the league, to being a Super Bowl team.
Right. I would describe what you're saying as like, a tangible practical
Hmm.
goal is get that slightly early conference championship appearance. Like get yourself as far as you can while it's like you're still surprising people and like you have cracks at the bat. But like largely over time, the goal is to prove this wasn't a fluke and that like yes, you are building a culture. Because you had a couple decent years with Deshaun Watson, but it never felt like it didn't feel like things were turning around. It was
Yeah,
too inconsistent. But if you have back-to-back good years with a young quarterback that everyone likes and like a lot of young talent surrounded by seasoned veterans and just like a coaching staff with like sort of like professional competency, like I think that just changes everything.
yeah.
Like people don't go to the Texans unless they're desperate. What if that changed?
That's pretty much it. I think it's no longer the people are going to the Texans because they're desperate and they want to be a starter. I think
Mhm.
it's the Texans can now be like, hey,
How would you like to win?
like wiggles their eyebrows, slides the contract
Mhm.
across the bar, and I feel like if they have a very good season this upcoming season, they're going to be able to pick, I would say, some like top third caliber players.
Yeah, I like that framing.
Hmm.
On to who was next? Oh God, it wasn't Jacksonville, right?
I think it was Jacksonville. Give me 1 second. It was Jacksonville. Barely Jacksonville.
Oh.
Which also kind of hot take. AFC South was like one of my favorite divisions to watch last season. It was
right.
always changing.
Right. It was. I would say it was similar to the AFC, where it's like, well, it's competitive, or the AFC North. But whereas the AFC North was competitive in like a woohoo, but what chow way, this was like, some of these teams, man. Case in point, the Jaguars, who halfway through the season had the inside track to the number 1 seed, and then the bottom completely fell out.
Yep.
I would say the vibes are,
nervous.
Well, this has to work eventually, right?
I feel
nervous. That's a good word for it.
I feel like the vibes are nervous. I think last season was not like a fluke because they were one of the best teams in the league for a bunch of weeks. I don't think that was a fluke. But I think with how they ended, this is when your starters, your coaches, and people like that start getting nervous because this is going to be a job security year. Because they did very good 2 seasons ago, like playoff, like come from behind playoff win, really showing off, and then they did very good for the majority of this season, where they're hanging up there with the Ravens and Chiefs for like division or for like conference winners. And then there was this whole side battle of Texans Colts going 1-for-1 with each other. We both win. We both lose. We both win. We both win. And that led down to the final game of the season. And Jacksonville kind of just like slowly dribbled their way, where it's just like, we could probably make it. But these 2 other teams are just all of a sudden just kicking each other's asses back and forth trying to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that fall off, it's a job security year. I think the team is like a hint too old. Hold on, I have a good thought.
Right.
I have a good thought. I'm just trying to think of the best way to articulate. So, you have the Texans, you have the Colts, which are both relatively young teams. So if they have a drop-off at the end of the season or like a sophomore slump, nobody really freaks out about that. Then you have people like the Chiefs, where they are kind of a new dynasty with just a lot of older players that are just doing what they do best and clearly winning games. And the Jaguars is that in-between danger zone where they don't have the seniority, but they don't have the rookie status to have that job security. Where it's just like...
Okay, that's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. See, you had to let me cook a little bit, but I did. Because it's...
Right.
They got like...
They're
Trevor
a tweener
Lawrence,
team.
Yeah. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, who aren't bad players, but they're not elite enough that it's just like, if we have a bad season, we'll make sure to keep them and see what we can restructure around them.
Right. There's a very real chance a lot of this gets blown up. Like, honestly, if they hadn't had that come from behind victory against the Chargers, a lot of this would have been blown up already. Yep. But you finally had that one playoff win. You have to pay Trevor Lawrence because, again, even if he's not living up to the expectations of a generational prospect,
he's still a top 32 quarterback easily.
Right? Yeah, you're like, we can't go through don't make us live through the doldrums of like the C.J. Beathard's and like Nathan Peterman's already. Like, we can't go back to that.
We can't.
And I like Etienne. Right. You can't. We're not starting Mac Jones. Like, don't make us do that. There's nothing more miserable in the NFL than like doing the doldrums of quarterback play.
Yeah.
And then you have like a lot of again, they have the reverse problem the Texans have now, where it's the Texans are earning their way to get premier talent, whereas the Jaguars keep having to pay for like premium for like good talent. Yeah. Christian Kirk's fine. Gabe Davis is fine if he never quite lived up to his expectations. Evan Ingram is fine.
Yeah.
The offensive line is fine. Most of this defense is just all right. Like, you have I do think Trayvon Walker is getting ready to have a breakout year, which you need him to because he was a first overall pick. But, like, yeah, honestly, it's kind of a problem that the most exciting player on this offense is Brian Thomas Jr., who was the 4th receiver picked in his draft.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like how I said, the Texans were that team where they can just slide over the contract with their eyebrows at the bar and just be like, hey. And then it's like people are like, all right, I'll sign. The Jaguars are going table to table at that bar, just being like starter deal question mark. No, okay. I think that's their spot. And
Yeah, like, but at the same time, I'm like, your goal, the victory state has to be win a playoff game,
yes,
or else, like, we're not
have,
going forward with this.
Like, if they don't win the playoff game, they at least have to make the playoffs, wild card or whatever. Because if they don't make that, I think there's going to be some strong changes that happen on that team.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the Indianapolis Colts, kind of the opposite scenario.
Right. They have the excuse of youth.
Yeah, young team where they can build around, and they have been. And I think it's going to, like, they had a great showing, even though almost every single game Anthony Richardson got pulled out for some form of boo-boo.
Right.
I think
right.
The Colts,
the vibes are great if you forget that their starting quarterback was injured 4 times in 3 games.
Well, you know who his backup is now, right? It's Joe Flacco, the wizard that helped lead the Browns. I think that's a very strong statement of, like, faith.
Yes.
Because not only is he gonna be like a solid backup, he's a solid mentor too. Because Anthony Richardson, real young kid, it's his 2nd season.
Mm. Yes.
Flacco
for all the excitement, for all the excitement around him, there was, like, if you watch it, it really is like OG Josh Allen, where you're like, every other play, you're like, what the hell is he thinking with that? Like, what are we doing here? But then you see him whip a ball around curve the bullet around 2 defenders to make a pass, and you're like, oh, this is the most incredible athlete I've ever seen in my entire life. They're going to win, they're going to win 15. Yeah, that's physically impossible. He's going to be the MVP within the next 2 years. Yeah, and that's why, like, I feel like they're an early candidate for our sweet baby boys this year, just because it's like, how can you not be excited at the 6'5" freak who can throw a ball 70 yards and also runs a 4.4? Like, how can you not be at least a little bit excited about that?
No,
And I think, yeah, that's what the vibes are based on.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens with them. I'm excited to see what happens with this entire division, but I think Colts are on my radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's like, I mean, if they have any weaknesses, it's a lot of, like, it's a team of, like, B minuses, led by a potential wild card and an A+ quarterback. You know, will Jonathan Taylor be able to keep it on? Will Michael Pittman be able to go up a next level? I am kind of excited to see what they do with Adonai Mitchell. Like, again, system-wise, they're very good. Like, I loved what they were doing with their offense last year. I think Adonai Mitchell kind of got screwed over by the combine, apparently. So he has diabetes. And a thing about diabetes is it can cause, like, really bad, like, sort of energy and mood problems, depending on, like, if you start out too early in the day. And all the combine stuff was during, like, the early morning, like all the interviews and stuff. So a lot of people think he kind of just got screwed over by the system. But, like, if he hits, he's going to hit hard. Because, again, he's another freak. He's, like, 6'5". He has incredible body control. I think a win state for them is compete. I'm not saying you have to make the playoffs, but you got to compete for the playoffs. You got to at least get as close as you did last year, where you're just on the cusp.
Mm-hmm.
And the obvious other one is Anthony Richardson has to at least play 16 games.
Yeah, I think...
Like, if you prove you can get him through a year, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And then the kind of the bummer of the division... Tennessee Titans. Oh, wait, did we say what our victory levels were for Colts outside of Anthony Richardson playing, like, 16 games? I think
I
it's the
would just
perfect
say
one.
compete for the playoffs. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even think you have to make it this year, but
No.
you gotta at least get close.
Yeah. If they pull at least a matching season to last season,
Mm,
there's gonna be some desires.
yeah. Yeah, the Tennessee Titans, who the vibes I would describe as, yeah, let's just go. You know,
Hmm.
let's
So
just exist.
so at the NFL Players Bar, where the Texans are at the bar, just making eye contact to get signatures, and the Jaguars are going table to table. You have the Titans asking people on their way out.
Mhm.
Like they're hanging
I
out.
love this metaphor. It's a shockingly good metaphor.
It works actually very well. I'm very happy I thought of it. Um, where they are hanging out by the doors, and all the new guys coming in. It's like, hey, like we're gonna try and get to you first, and all the older guys heading out. Hey, you want a starting job, like on your way out? Because I think that's how
Right.
I feel like the team is, where it's like they have D Hop, Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, who are all like years into their careers. They're like that's their main like group for that, and then their quarterback Will Levis, Mr. Mayo himself.
Hmm.
They lost Derrick Henry. He went he went to the side opposite of the Texans of the bar. He went to the
He
VIP
went to
bar.
the exclusive table.
Yeah,
Like the team,
he
the
went
good
behind
teams
the
hold in
red
court.
velvet rope. He went behind the red velvet rope and walked. That's where he hung out.
Right.
Um, I just really just map out this bar that I made. We'll talk about that later. Um, I think where the Tennessee Titans are at, where they had the biggest loss of the offseason, in my opinion, with losing Derrick Henry. I don't think there's a single bigger like direct hit to a team than that.
Right, because it's an identity.
Yeah,
Like, I think this team feels weird because they don't really have an identity anymore. They
correct.
purged their coaching staff. They have, they have the fourth quarterback, or
Hmm.
fifth? No, fourth, in his draft, who's kind of
Yeah,
like a wild card. You do have this, like, kind of collection of, like, I don't want to use the
it's
phrase rejects, but kind of like afterthoughts. Tony Pollard had a bad year last year because
yeah,
it turns out breaking a leg does matter. Calvin Ridley didn't really live up to his expectations in Tennessee. DeAndre Hopkins could have ring chased but decided to go for the bag.
yeah.
And Tyler Boyd is Tyler Boyd. Like,
Yep.
truly a who's who of, like, eh.
It's like the Jaguars where their entire team is like too old, not old enough, but too old. This team is like the exact opposite, where they are either kind of like too old and then super young. Like I said, they're that
Mm,
doorway team,
mm,
and I I don't have much faith in them. If I'm being
right.
honest, I think their victory level is to find an identity.
Right. I
One,
really think that's what it is.
yeah,
Get enough talent that you can decide what you want to do, and more importantly, figure out. My win state for them is like adjacent to that of like figure out if you want to commit to Will Levis or not. You've surrounded him with just enough talent that you can probably grind it out. You can see what you can do, and like that should be the goal.
yeah.
Is Will Levis your identity or not?
And also, like for like context, like looking at their players on Google, not a lot of them are their like Titans profile pictures. There's
Hmm.
people wearing Tyler Boyd, Bengals, Legarius Sneed, Chiefs, like Chiefs gear. Tony Pollard is at a press conference when he signed. D Hop's in front of the Houston Texans logo. Like, I feel like that's a huge lack of identity for a team. And
Yeah, exactly.
you gotta pick, I would say, 1 to 3 of these like actual names for your team to build around
Mhm.
and find that.
I think that's a good way of putting it. All right. And that leaves us...
the AFC East.
Okay.
Do
should I just get the thing out of the way?
All right, I'll give you 90 seconds, starting now.
Okay, the vibes are actually pretty bad. If it wasn't for Keon Coleman being a charming son of a gun, they'd actually be kind of putrid. Basically, an entire era of Bills football kind of had to walk out the door. Stephon, Trey White, Mitch Morris, basically our entire defensive back core. And basically, it's the consequence of not winning the big one. At some point, you'd have to let people go. People age out. And while some Bills fans are like, well, this is good, we didn't replace them with anyone. Where's the talent replacement? Where are the big signings? Where's, the hope? I'm just standing here waiting for hope. This offseason was a lot of, bad luck, a lack of signings, and a lot of, blind faith that people who have been here and not quite done enough will suddenly be able to do enough. How was that? Was that 90?
You still have, a little bit left, actually. That was...
Oh, really?
60, yeah. Or it could have been over 90 and you have, 2 minutes left. I don't know. Math is hard.
All right. Well, I guess just the speed run. But yeah, to actually talk about, basically this team has a lot of faith. Basically, the team is putting a lot of faith in sort of B-level guys either elevating to A tier or being just good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Khalil Shakir has been impressive, but he hasn't been that great. Keon Coleman has upside, but drafting him made more sense when you also had Stephon Diggs. Basically, to replace Gabe Davis, not Stephon Diggs. Curtis Samuel is one of those guys who we keep telling ourselves will be good if he has a good quarterback. Dalton Kincaid could be Travis Kelce, but we haven't seen it yet. The offensive line is actually fine. For once, it's actually our strength. And then you have, Greg Rousseau, A.J. Up, a defensive line of guys who it's well, we drafted them high. They have to be good eventually, right?
Well,
we already lost our best defensive player with a torn bicep.
Yeah, well, Gable Stevenson, former WWE superstar Gable Stevenson, is also a defensive tackle for the Bills.
For some reason. Yeah, and, I know he has a questionable history, and it's the most Sean McDermott thing he could have possibly done. I will just say, the fact that DeMar Hamlin is starting for this team right now because of injuries is not aspiration. It's not like the Disney Channel ending to this. It's actually a really red flag. There's not a lot of talent.
Yeah, speaking of Disney Channel ending, looking at their players, why does safety Cole Bishop look like a poor rendering of Taylor Lautner as a child?
I don't know. There's a renaissance of white defensive backs. What do you want me to say?
No,
we're back, baby.
Look at his picture on the Google the Buffalo Bills and
what the hell went wrong with the lighting there?
Do you see what I mean?
That is a man who should not have white lighting on him. Yeah, that is a man who gets the orangey yellow light bulbs every time.
Yeah, there's him, and then there's Joe Andreessen, EESS, where it's are you guys old enough to play?
Yeah. Again, leave it to the Buffalo Bills, and I promise I won't spend too much time on this. Leave it to the Buffalo Bills to have. They had 10 draft picks going into this draft, a draft known for being very top heavy. So ideally, you trade up, drafted every single one of them. Youth movement, except Josh Allen is already almost 30, and again, I just think of the Cam Newton thing, where it's you think you have plenty of time, and then he just has one too many hits to his shoulder, and suddenly it's all over. And I'm worried this is the start of that.
Yeah, I think their victory level, that max for them, it's kind of steep. You gotta be winning in the playoffs, or you're going to be expecting some losses.
Yeah, again, and we'll talk about, they weirdly are very similar to the Eagles this year, where you could tell me that they're in the conference title game, and this is finally the year it all comes together, where the bad bounces break their way. Or Sean McDermott's fired by November, especially because we are kind of looking to get not a full new owner, but someone will take over a huge chunk of the franchise, and with the Pakulas a bit preoccupied with health issues that I won't repeat here because a lot of it was leaked and I feel like it's wrong to leak other people's health history. they might not necessarily be the most interested in micromanaging a sports franchise right now. But at the same time, I would describe their win state as, well, you have to compete for a Super Bowl, even though you don't really have the guns for it anymore. And it really is just going to come down to just having a top 5 quarterback enough.
Yeah, I think that's kind of scary for them.
Yeah, it's a very scary time to be a Bills fan. Ain't gonna sugarcoat it. All right, who is next?
The Miami Dolphins.
I would describe them as vibes shockingly similar to the Bills, but you don't notice it because it was slightly quieter.
Yeah, I would say the vibes are better than the Bills.
I guess they have to be.
Yeah, because they're more set up than the Bills.
Right. Their talent drain was almost exclusively on the defense, where they lost a lot of very good defensive players.
They did lose a lot of
but
defense.
The offense is basically the same.
Yeah, it's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and OBJ.
Right. And like I hate being an Odell Beckham homer, but he was actually good last year. He did exactly as much as he was asked and delivered. He didn't have a lot of opportunities.
He was a very good wide receiver 3 last year. If he was,
and like
I don't expect him to be.
Maybe that's not enough. But
Waddle, unless if there's injuries involved. But I think that's like that right amount.
Right. Honestly, the reason why the Dolphins feel weird is because it kind of feels like, all right, well, these next couple years are it. Like, we have 1 or 2 more years, we can reasonably keep all this together.
And then they're going back to the bottom.
Yeah, and it's like, all right, then we're back to the bottom, and it's like, well, do we have enough to, like, how many truly great games have we won over the last 2-ish years of this iteration of the team? Like, the Bills were a disaster last year. They were a mess, and we still couldn't beat them. We got absolutely punked by the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. Like, basically, anytime we went against a team who could punch back, we folded like laundry. Like, all right, I guess we run it back and hope that this time it goes a little different. Except now we're paying Tua a cartoonish amount of money.
Yeah.
I really think that's where the vibes are rough, because it's like, you have to pay Tua so much money. Again, you have to, because it's like...
Once the money becomes a bigger factor, that team is going to drastically change.
Right. So now you have the window of, well, he's not that expensive yet, so let's hold out hope that we can still do it. But again, like, all the litigation of whether or not you pay him or not, let me just, for a laugh, read you off every single quarterback who played for them after Dan Marino. Jay Fielder, Damon Howard, Ray Lucas, Brian Greasy, A.J. Feely, Sage Rosenfels. God, I haven't even heard of some of these people. Gus Forte, Sage Rosenfels again. Dante Culpepper. That was the year they could have gotten Drew Brees, but made the wrong choice. Joey Harrington, Chloe Lemon, Trent Green, John Beck, the most fake-ass name I've ever heard. Chad Pennington, Chad Henne, Tyler Thigpen. That's naming random guys. Matt Moore, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Moore again somehow. Jay fucking Cutler, Ryan Tannehill again. Brock Osweiler, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh Rosen, Ryan Fitzpatrick one more time, Tua Tagovailoa, Jacoby Brissett. I almost called him Jacoby Brisket. I've done that before. Skylar Thompson, Tua. Like, this is the most long-term starting quarterback you've had in forever, basically.
Marino.
Yeah, basically Dan Marino. Like, Ryan Tannehill got, like, 3-ish years, and Tua's, like, on 4-ish now. Like, it's so exhausting being on the quarterback circus, so you kind of just have to. And, like, I do feel bad for Tua, because the concussions hide the fact that he also had his hip explode. Like, I do feel like sometimes we underrate, like, we kind of just let injuries go in a way we shouldn't, where it's like, why isn't Tua as good as he was supposed to be? And it's like, well, because in his last season in college, his freaking hip exploded. What happened to Carson Wentz? Well, he tore his ACL, and then another guy won a Super Bowl, and he never quite got his explosiveness back. Like, Tua's pretty darn good, considering there was a chance he was never going to play football again. And then there was a second time where he might not have ever played football again.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, what is a realistic goal for them? Like,
I think...
win a playoff game for a change.
I think you got to make, like, a conference appearance with this team. If you don't make...
Right.
If I was the owner and I saw this team, I'm pretty happy. And if I don't make at least the conference with this lineup, I'm kind of like, what the fuck am I spending my money on? Like, I'm not saying sell
Exactly.
the team, but consider restructuring. Despite how good it is, it's like, yeah, this is it's setting up the whole Tony Stark did it in a cave like
Less
situation.
talented teams have gotten further than you.
Yeah.
The Bills were distinctly less talented than you last year in a number of
Yeah.
respects, and they still won a playoff game.
Yeah. The
Like,
Houston
that's the
Texans,
problem, though.
who the last season, like, were the biggest losers, made it further. The
Exactly.
fuck?
Right. Like, yeah, it really is, because that's the problem. You're already spending so much money, and you have so much top-end talent, and sort of aging top-end talent.
Yeah.
Like, as good as Tyreek Hill was last year, there was a big increase in, like, little nagging injuries where he's like, oh, foot hurts, I'm out for 12 plays, and then I'm back, but then I'm out again, and then I'm back in. Like, you kind of have to get as far as you can this year. It kind of might not be enough to win a playoff game, because by the time Tua gets that monkey off his back, it's like, well, Tyreek's gone, Waddle wants more money, like, Mostert's done, Achan's. I don't know. I just don't know.
You're either pushing hard or you're getting ready for I think this is the biggest, like, glass cannon team of the season, where if this season does not go incredibly well for them, we talked about we talked about teams like losing a lot, or like with the Jaguars, I said there's going to be like restructuring. Like, your team is filled with big names that other teams with a lot more winning potential are like very willing to offer money for.
Yeah. Right. They have the biggest chance to explode following a bad season.
Yes.
Which, speaking of which, inexplicably another one of those.
Jets.
The vibes are crusty as hell, and they reek.
If they did not spend the entire offseason into the darkness of whatever Aaron Rodgers' darkness was, I feel like you wasted your time.
Yeah, I genuinely feel bad for so many people on this team.
Oh, I feel so bad for like 90% of the team. But you gotta fucking mind meld with them. And you, like, with Aaron Rodgers on offense. And then defense, you gotta just figure this shit out. Because, like, Hassan Reddick traded over from the Eagles, all of a sudden is just, like, not showing up. And no one's hearing shit from him.
Which, kids, this is why normally when teams agree to trade someone in the offseason who has a contract up in the air, they usually have the player start negotiating that contract before you commit to the trade. Because otherwise, you get into this situation where he just doesn't want to play for you anymore. It is kind of wild they've managed to keep so much of this defense together, this top 5 over 3 years defense, and yet so much of it actually does kind of hinge on whether or not Hassan Reddick plays. Because if you don't have that pass rushing threat, the whole thing kind of falls apart.
Yes.
Very quickly.
You go from a very strong defense to a very strong defensive backfield. Very quickly.
And it's wild because there actually aren't that many question marks on this team inexplicably. No. They finally got around to fixing the offensive line, and it'll ideally be healthy last year. You added Mike Williams as like a medium risk, relatively high reward second receiving option. Mm-hmm. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are still healthy and looked great considering the circumstances last year. Again,
people say if you don't get Breece Hall in the first round, you are wasting a pick.
Yeah, that is kind of my... Well, I don't want to say too many strategies, but like his numbers last year are insane given the fact that they just didn't run an offense the minute Aaron Rodgers got hurt. But at the same time, it's like, again, both sides of the ball, it is really like, oh, it's like you built this incredible fighter jet. You thought of everything, except what happens when it rains?
Yeah.
Did you think of that? Because, like, there's another scenario where Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again, or it turns out the sort of diminished state he was in his last Green Bay season is accurate, and just the whole thing turns into mud. And on the other hand, they did finally address the biggest issue of a backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, but your offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett, who lives up to his last name. And I'm like, well, if Aaron Rodgers his only saving grace is Aaron Rodgers likes him. So if you lose Aaron Rodgers, does he just turtle up again?
Yeah.
Again, this is another team with an insane range of outcomes because, even independent of injuries, which makes every team unpredictable.
Yeah.
Like, there truly is a scenario where they are, 12-4 or 12-5. I hate this.
Yeah, they could be
game.
12-5. They could be 5-12, and there's no way to tell.
Yeah. And for me, the win state is you have to at least get to the conference title game because it's like, this is it. This is the team. You have a 2-year window. And if you don't at least win a playoff game, everyone's fired. They should have been fired already, frankly. But you kept finding excuses of well, we were, Zach Wilson isn't what we thought of. But don't worry. We got Aaron Rodgers. Well, Aaron Rodgers was hurt. it is what it is.
That's why my win state,
we're out of excuses.
My win state for them is probably the lowest of all the win states. Aaron Rodgers plays 2 drives. That's it. That's all I want to see from the Jets, minimum.
Right.
If Aaron Rodgers plays 2 drives, they've already improved from the last season.
That's the thing. I'm very bullish on so many parts of this team in terms of fantasy football, but at the same time, I'm I almost can't conceive a scenario where this works. Just the whole Aaron Rodgers to the Jets thing is already so cartoonish and stupid and ridiculous. Yes. My brain can't process the idea that it could actually work.
Yeah. No,
it's like a Rube Goldberg machine where I'm genuinely there is no way this is going to successfully make my breakfast for me. Something's going to explode and kill me.
Yeah. This is 2 blocks away from the AFC South bar where it's just you kind of hold the Jets are there and you someone's oh, what's over there? What's that commotion? And the guy just holds up his arm in front of you and just shakes his head no. He doesn't tell you why you don't go over there. He just shakes his head no. And
he's got some really he's got some thoughts about Moderna as a company.
Yeah, it's you are going to if you go over to it's not even the bad side of the tracks. It's you walk across the street to avoid this building. Not even
right.
The people,
you start digging into your pocket to get your keys Wolverine style in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
Jesus. And that leads us to the last team of the AFC, the New England Patriots.
Whew.
The vibes are bewildered. The vibes actually, they're caught between good and bad because on one hand, the start of the offseason, there's a bit in Rayman with these characters called the Teensies, and they're sort of fairy type things. And the bit in one of the games is all of them want to be king, but they can't decide who's king. So they're constantly fighting over the crown. And weirdly, that was a lot of this offseason where interviewers were actually having to ask, hey, who's actually making the decisions for this team? Who's making the roster choices?
Yeah.
It's kind of wild to think we are in a new era where, they have to completely change how they do things after 20 years.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. Where it's who knows? There was I think this is, the official start of the post-Tom Brady era. So you have the Tom Brady era.
Those other years were kind of just it pretending.
Yeah. Then you have the Mac Jones era, quote unquote, is actually just referred to as the recovery from the Tom Brady era. The karma police is gonna start hitting you after another after everything. And now it's truly, in my opinion, a new team now, and also Belichick's gone.
Right. Yeah, Belichick's gone. Now we actually get the change. This, the Mac Jones era was basically after the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era fizzled out. Europe was all right, let's put what's their last relative who didn't get his head cut off? Charles X. You're in charge, and he immediately is fuck you. I'm doing everything my dad did. I am actual god on earth. And then they cut his head off, and it's oh, all right. So okay, now let's get serious about what France looks like after all of this. I don't know, constitutional democracy, I guess. But yeah, it's just a weird energy. It's hard to say. I think I'm nicer on the vibes here just because, yes, their offensive line is still bad. Yes, their defense has upside, but they did just trade arguably their best player. It has upside, and it's also the question of like how much talent, like how good is it, or how good was Belichick?
Yeah.
But then I'm like, what are the three things they needed this offseason? Quarterback, some kind of offensive line, and a receiver, and they did kind of achieve two of those.
Yeah.
Drake May has looked really, really good in the preseason, arguably better than Jacoby Brissett. And Jalen Polk, he's a guy I actually won for the Bills. Like, they double dipped at receiver and got Javon Barker and Jalen Polk. And I actually think that duo has a lot of upside.
It has a lot of potential. I think the best part about that duo, or the best potential option for that duo, is if how strong their offensive line is. Because if they buy Drake May enough time to hit one of them, they're gonna look fantastic.
Right. Like, they're competent NFL wide receivers, which is much more than I can say the Patriots have had in years. I really do think we underrate how awful the Patriots... Like, we simultaneously really glommed on them last year, but kind of underrated how bad they are. I completely forgot about Bailey Zappi doing a double fake spike and then throwing it into triple coverage.
Yeah.
I forgot that game at the end of the year where basically the Bills were begging to be upset again. And Bailey Zappi had 3 straight turnovers. And it's like, I am not starting another game. We are getting a top 3 pick. Honestly, for me, the win state for me is don't have to play Drake May. Because as fun as he's looked, I don't want him to be out there until this team is ready to go.
Yeah.
And yes, it kind of sucks that I'm framing Jacoby Brissett as cannon fodder, but that's just kind of the game you play when you draft a top 3 quarterback that you can't afford to fuck up, right? You already drafted a quarterback after Tom Brady. You kind of can't afford to fuck it up again.
Yeah.
Especially because Drake May, again, looks really good. He looks super competent. He looks locked in. His arm pops. There's a great bit, and we'll talk about when we talk about the NFC in a little bit, a great bit where Drake May and Brian Daboll, the coach of the Giants, are just breaking down routes, and you're like, oh no, he's smart too. And you're like, God damn, this guy, I'm so mad he went to the Patriots. Mm-hmm. I was really hoping they'd chicken out and draft Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. I think...
But yeah, they will probably... It's okay if they have the worst record in the league, frankly. It's okay.
I think...
They can live with that for a year.
I think their victory level is just nobody on the coaching staff getting fired.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
They have... Aaron Rodgers still has the lowest bar for me. But I feel like this is, very down there where it's just, they can't get much worse. And honestly, if they get worse, they're pushing for draft picks.
Right.
Because you could also, argue, getting, a top 3 draft pick again. When you have, a quarterback, those teams that need quarterbacks, you just trade that for multiple picks and turn one into, 3 or 4. Because there's going to be people desperate for quarterbacks again this upcoming season. I fully believe. Right.
And pour your heart out if you didn't get any of the ones from this draft, and you have to pick from a slightly less good, good bunch next time around.
Yeah, you're picking from the B team, as of right now.
Yeah. Unless someone really surprises, but we will see.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And that wraps up our talk about the AFC. We are going to post a second episode about the NFC. Keep your eyes out for that. Kevin, any final thoughts you want to leave the people with?
Not right now. I've got some stuff for the end of next episode when we're gonna just dip our toes in week 1 a little bit.
All right. And, well, I was going to say while you wait, but they'll probably be up around the same time. But we will be back in a little bit with y'all.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.